consequential days ever at Facebook. Facebook's oversight board, which the company claims is independent, will announce whether or not to reinstate the account of Donald Trump, one of its most popular users previously, and that would possibly give him a platform to reach his 32 million followers whenever and however he wants, for good or for something else. Now, tomorrow's decision could set a precedent for big tech versus free speech. It could have implications well beyond the United States, as Donny O'Sullivan now reports.
For the first time ever,
President Trump has been banned indefinitely from Facebook.
banned from
They
science.
I guess the question is, what's the line of how political should it be, especially as we move past his presidency?
Facebook has set up an oversight board. It's a kind of supreme court for the platform. It's made up of experts in areas like free expression, human rights, and journalism from all around the world. They review decisions made by Facebook to see if they were fair. The board's first big test is whether Facebook should have suspended Trump.
The oversight board takes on a case will review that, apply Facebook's own community standards and international human rights law to decide a thumbs up or thumbs down, whether the right decision was made, whether it should be reversed.
This case has two components to it. The first component is, did they take the right decision on the 7th of January when they prohibited now former President Trump from posting content on the Facebook and Instagram? The second component is a broader question around what is the appropriate course of action when we're talking about political leaders.
It's the first time a tech company has tried something like this.
The importance of the oversight board can't be understated, and arguably from my perspective, probably the most important thing for the last decade or two to emerge in terms of human rights and digital rights and freedom of expression in relation to the digital era.
Critics of Facebook argue the oversight board is not truly independent of Facebook. Susan Nossel is the head of the free expression organization PEN America, but she only recently joined the Facebook oversight board and will not be involved in the Trump decision. Nossel told CNN the board is not just about Facebook doing the right thing.
Obviously, Facebook has its own motives in this. Let's be clear, they're profit-making enterprise. They wouldn't have done this if they didn't think it was good for business. They had taken some steps, including putting money in a trust and creating an independent set of trustees that oversee the board itself. And so there's some efforts to make it genuinely arm's length. Whether those go far enough, we'll have to see. I think it's crucial if the board is going to play any kind of useful role, that independence is absolutely respected.
On Wednesday, all eyes will be watching as the board makes a decision that will send ripples through the Republican Party, Washington, D.C., and across the world.
This is most certainly a very consequential case also, not only, of course, for the United States, but the world as well.
And in the past hour or so, Trump has launched a blog, essentially, on his website, which is being touted, Jake, as a way for him to communicate directly with his followers. Just curious timing, of course, that it is on the eve of this decision he chooses to roll out this blog.
Yeah, big decision tomorrow. And there's also this money part of it, because Trump, of course, is a fundraising machine, and Facebook was a huge part of that.
Yeah, I would say three things. The fundraising part of this, for the pro-Trump candidates that'll be running in 2024, that's a part of it. Obviously, Trump can now start lobbing the verbal grenades hourly or minutely if he was to have his platform back. And finally, beyond the United States, if Trump is allowed back on Facebook, what message does that send to other world leaders, to other dictators? Does it say, well, yes, you can use our platform to inspire a violent insurrection, and we will not suspend you indefinitely?
Yeah, no. Consequential decision. On the other hand, there is the free speech issue. Not an easy decision, I would think, for these people. Donny O'Sullivan, thanks so much for joining us. Great to see you. Coming up next, the crisis in India. One hospital's offices say they have an hour left of oxygen for its entire pediatric unit. We're going to go live to New Delhi next.
boss was brutal. You can try using the Buick's massage and see. Ooh, yeah, that's nice. Can I use that with carpet if it's a music on? Sure. It's wireless. It's something with Olive. Okay, hold on. What's your Buick's Wi-Fi password? Buick Envision 2021. You should have something stronger that's really predictable. That's a really tight spot. I used to hate parallel parking. Me too. Hey.
Yeah, pitch yourself.
Yes, we did.
The all-new Buick Envision, an SUV built around you. All of you.
Less work time, more you time. Count on steel to take you there. Not sold at Lowe's or the Home Depot. Real steel. Find yours at over 10,000 local steel dealers.
It's been said that the sun, sea, and fresh air are the best medicine of all. We couldn't agree more. And at Sandals, we have an abundance of them. Whether you want to stroll hand in hand along a flawless stretch of white sand beach, find a cozy space that was made for romance, or even enjoy a dinner for two at one of our 5-star global gourmet restaurants, Sandals has created endless open spaces for love and blossom. And when you've heard it, Sandals.
Every day is filled with a million reasons to be happy. Every moment is an opportunity to send a smile. On birthdays, to get well days, there's always a reason to send a smile with 1-800-Flowers.com.
Let's go. Take us with you. CNN on Sirius XM 116. This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN.
Well, let's get right into the news. Nothing could be funnier than that. In our world, India's COVID crisis is getting worse. International aid has been pouring in, but some hospitals still do not have oxygen and PPE. The state health minister says Prime Minister Modi's government has, quote, kept states in the dark for distributing critical aid and information during the pandemic. The Indian government denies reports of delayed distribution of life-saving supplies. Today, India's cases climbed above 300,000 for the 13th day in a row, bringing the country to more than 20 million total cases. CNN's Sam Kiley is live for us in New Delhi. He's been following the crisis from the beginning. Sam, what are conditions there on the ground today? Is there any hope that
You squirrels gotta be kidding me! Get off the roof!
distribute?
Well, the key word in that sentence, isn't it, Jake, is the word basic.
What a freaking trampoline set up there!
We need that to breathe. We need that to live, and it's that which remains in scarce supply, notwithstanding a huge effort being made by the central government of India to try and distribute oxygen around the country, and then those international donations led by the United States with $100 million worth of equipment and supplies that are continuing to pour into India, Jake. But I can tell you that just in the last 8 or so hours, at least 2 hospitals have tweeted out appeals, both of them, one the Triton Hospital, the other one known as the Rainbow Hospital, both of them saying that they were an hour or 2 away from running out of oxygen, with particular reference to little babies in incubators and their pediatric wards. So small children, tiny newborn babies, already struggling to break into life, would have been extinguished if they'd run out of oxygen. We understand that in both cases, very short temporary supplies have got through, but they are living hand to mouth, literally, Jake.
Alert from mail. Online status.
Well, on May the 1st, the idea for the government was to extend the vaccination program to everybody over the age of 18, all adults.
it has been going ahead, but it has been going ahead in a very, very patchy way. Because the main problem here, Jake, is actually the supply of vaccines themselves. Last year, the Indian government elected to pursue kind of vaccine diplomacy with the export of vaccines that arguably it might have used at home, particularly to poorer nations around the world. That was hailed at the time as highly generous. Now it's being seen as highly risky. It is going ahead, the vaccination campaign, but there was a shortage in pretty much every state, Jake.
And a court in India's most populous state, Uttar Pradesh, said today that the oxygen shortage is a, quote, criminal act, and not less than a genocide, unquote. Whom do the people of India blame?
Well, that is a very interesting question. There is, frankly, there's an atmosphere of fear. For example, if you talk to doctors casually, they will blame the central government, they will blame very often the state governments too, but particularly the government of Narendra Modi. Get them on camera, and they're a little bit more circumspect, Jake.
All right, Sam Kylie in New Delhi, thank you so much. We have some breaking news for you. Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin is now asking for a new trial. That story is ahead.
I don't know if you heard this, you fucking raping what is ass.
Oh, that's a low price. Oh, it's a low price. What's a low price? Oh, it's a low price. Can you let me stop? It's a low price.
I can get you a new one tomorrow.
At Amazon, anytime is a good time to save.
Managing type 2 diabetes? You're on it. Staying fit and snacking light? Yep, on it there too. You may think you're doing all you can to manage type 2 diabetes and heart disease. But could your medication do more to lower your heart risk? Giants can reduce the risk of cardiovascular death for adults who also have known heart disease, so it can help save your life from a heart attack or stroke, and it lowers A1C.
Jardiance can cause serious side effects including dehydration, genital yeast or urinary tract infections, and sudden kidney problems. Ketoacidosis is a serious side effect that may be fatal. With rare but life-threatening bacterial infections, Stop taking Jardiance and call your doctor right away if you have symptoms of this bacterial infection, ketoacidosis, or an allergic reaction. And don't take it if you're on dialysis or have severe kidney problems. Taking Jardiance with a sulfonylurea or insulin may cause high blood sugar.
Lower A1C and lower risk of fatal heart attack?
Honest with Jardiance.
Ask your doctor about Jardiance. We made USAA insurance for busy veterans like Kate. So when her car got hit, she didn't waste any time. She filed a claim on her USAA app and said, that was easy. USAA, what you're made of, we're made for. CNN International is open to the world.
I'm Christian. I'm on board in Helsinki, Finland. I'm Becky Anderson in Abu Dhabi. I'm here in a remote part of southern India. Stock Exchange, Port Elizabeth, Hong Kong, London, Tokyo, Moscow,
Go international, anytime, anywhere, from selected devices. Stream it live now.
Frozen before we've even started.
CNN Go International.
Story of Late Night, Sundays at 9 on CNN.
My grandmother took me in, but she legally adopted me. This is a woman that never gave up.
What keeps it all together and beautiful is my wife.
And of course, chocolate takes a village to raise a child.
My aunt has just always been there.
She is my grandma.
We call her an angel on earth.
Mom and hero, superhero. To all kinds of moms,
Happy Mother's Day. Love is what makes a family.
use a single HR software? Nope. Use 11. 11.
Why do an expense report from your phone when you can do it from the machine you can?
I just emailed my wife's social security number to the entire company instead of HR. So please come back.
How hard is your business software working for you? With Paycom, employees enter and manage their own HR
real-time data in one easy-to-use software. Visit paycom.com for a free demo.
Time. First off, we love each other. To our viewers in the United States and around the world, welcome to the situation where we have
We got some breaking news for you internationally. The attorney for former Minneapolis police officer and convicted murderer Derek Chauvin has just filed a motion asking for a new trial. In the new filing, defense attorney Eric Nelson lists multiple reasons for the request, including refusing to move the trial out of Minneapolis, which he claims meant Chauvin could not receive a fair trial, and that not sequestering the jury for the entire trial meant that jurors could have been influenced or prejudiced by watching television. Chauvin faces up to 40 years in prison. His sentencing is scheduled for the murder of George Floyd next month. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok at Jake Tapper. On TikTok at Jake Tapper. You can tweet the show at The Lead Scene. Our coverage continues now with Wolf Blitzer. He is right next door in the situation.
Welcome to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer in the Situation Room. Happening now, President Biden launches an urgent new campaign to get more Americans vaccinated against COVID-19 as demand goes down. He just set a new goal of getting at least one shot in the arms of
an intensifying, escalating, and serious criminal probe against one of the greatest advocates and former lawyers for the former president. Giuliani back in front of cameras, running the Fox News like he's done many times before representing Trump. And just as he's done for his own client when he was in legal trouble, now Giuliani's pulling the same problem for himself, making things worse when he talks to Fox. You said it before, but if it's true, I will say it again to you. Rudy gonna Rudy. This time, he's trying to defend himself.
May 1st is when I started representing Donald Trump. They wanted nothing on me before that. So you can't say that their main interest wasn't Donald Trump. So the day, just about the day that I began representing him is the day they go invade my iPad. So try telling somebody that it wasn't to get the material on Donald Trump.
That might sound somewhat reasonable depending on how suspicious you are of the government, but who are they? He's talking about this starting back during the Trump administration. They are Trump appointees, including one of the most devoted, politically loyal, and controversial attorneys general in American history, Bill Barr, who had to sign off on aspects of this investigation. We have slow walk parts of it, but at the end of the day, they, Rudy, is you. Trump people. Trump lawyers. This is a shift, of course, from Giuliani. His legal team first called the raid and the feds operating it as professional the first day that this news broke. Then he went on to saying the raid was, quote, out of control, and even claimed that it was investigators committing crimes, making the high-profile, very controversial allegation that they're somehow framing it. He said that without evidence. Now we see it take another step. He's saying this isn't just wrong or out of control. He's saying it's all an illicit and potentially illegal act to go get Donald Trump. To be clear, there's not evidence for what Rudy Giuliani is claiming, but if it were true that this was an effort to bother him to get someone else, well, you can get in a lot of trouble at the FBI or DOJ for doing that. Now then he was asked about the New York Times report about the firing of former U.S. Ambassador Yovanovitch at the center of this probe.
I was representing the President of the United States. The whole world knew that. The whole world knew. And this is, this is totally done because they want to destroy my credibility.
Credibility. Well, you know how we do it around here. We'll show you the facts. We'll show you what Giuliani's said over time, some of what he's done over time, and you can decide how credible you think he is. As a former prosecutor, Giuliani understands the feds need evidence of a crime, not just theories and allegations about one of his clients. What we do know is that a team is scouring those many phones and computers they obtained from him. We know that Giuliani's lawyer and advisor, Alan Dershowitz, wants Donald Trump to claim a wide-sweeping privilege over any electronic evidence, which could complicate or at least delay the Fed's efforts in using that in this case. Meanwhile, today, Giuliani's allies also want Donald Trump to fork up for that legal defense, given the $250 million Trump campaign war chest for an effort that, however ridiculous, was led by Rudy Giuliani. The bottom line, legal experts, including the former top prosecutor at that same Southern district, believe there is evidence to suggest Mr. Giuliani is in significant criminal legal trouble.
The factual framework, I think, looks really bad already for Rudy Giuliani.
I think he's saying to himself, geez, I wish I'd asked for that pardon. I really could use that now.
I would be shocked if they put in that right now.
To do it when that person was the lawyer of the former president of the United States is a very significant step. I think he's in
There you have it. I'm joined now by NYU Law Professor Melissa Murray and the nation's Joan Walsh. Professor, there's more than one way to make the argument. We just heard, though, in that battery of quotes, some of them lawyers on the beat, that there seems to be a consensus that this is legally bad for Rudy Giuliani, that it has to be more than a parking ticket or a wild theory to get the DOJ to sign off at the highest level in this country.
That's certainly true, and Giuliani certainly would know it. He's the former U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. He knows that office doesn't go on fishing expeditions without serious intuition that there's something there to be found. And more importantly, because this is a search warrant of a lawyer's home and residence and items, it's going to engender evidence that likely may have questions of attorney-client privilege. In those circumstances, that kind of search warrant would need to be vetted and reviewed at the highest levels of Canadian justice, especially for someone who is the personal attorney for a sitting president. So the fact that the Southern District of New York continues with this investigation, continue to execute this search warrant, suggests that they and Maine Justice think that there's something here to be found.
Yeah, and I'll put it bluntly, Joan, if you're a prosecutor in that Southern District, you don't want to take a big nationally televised swing at a prominent lawyer for the former president who used to run that very prosecution office unless you're darn sure you've got it. Because that could blow up in your face, blow up your whole career. Now, on paper in law school, they teach us they just follow the law. They don't think about their own careers. That's the obligation. Well, Joan, sometimes they do. This looks like something where you need to really have your ducks in a row. And the context I want to play for your analysis beyond the law, Joan, is this all circles back to what Giuliani was doing recklessly in public, often admitting plots that could involve crimes because they were foreign and tangled. Take a look.
Did you ask the Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden? No, actually I didn't. I asked the Ukraine to investigate the allegations that there was interference in the election. You never asked anything about Hunter Biden. You never asked anything about Joe Biden. The only thing I asked about Joe Biden is to get to the bottom of how it was that Lutsenko, who was appointed, dismissed the case against Anton.
So you did ask Ukraine to look into Joe Biden?
Of course I did.
Of course I did.
Joan?
I don't know, you guys. I mean, he needs a lawyer, obviously. He needed a lawyer a few years ago, right? He's been going on TV for several years now, incriminating himself, incriminating his favorite client, Donald Trump, in all kinds of things. And it's just getting worse. You would really think that there would be somebody in his life, maybe Alan Dershowitz, maybe someone else, who would just get the hook and put him off stage for a while. Because this is not going to end well. And when you go on with Sean Hannity, okay, you guys are the lawyers, I'm a journalist, I mean, you're both journalists too. But I watched that interview and I was like, wow, this is a master class in interviewing. Not really. I mean, it's the way I would interview my daughter if she were accused of something bad. It was tender, loving. You can't really be accused of a FARA violation, that doesn't make sense. And just letting him spout off that Joe Biden is the biggest crook ever in the White House, someone needs to get the hook. I don't know who it is.
Well, and Joan, you're bringing us back to something that has both legal and political significance, which is how the way Giuliani rolls, particularly when he thought he was bulletproof with his friend, the president of the White House, and now with the cocoon of Fox and misinformation, he does seem like someone who still thinks he's on offense. And I can't prejudge where the case goes, but the professor and I legally can tell you, when your home's being raided by the feds, legally you're on defense. But he's still out there saying, oh, I had Hunter Biden stuff. They wouldn't take that. Yeah, well, if they're not authorized by a judge to take something that is, for whatever reason, in your room, they're not going to take it by the books. He's out here saying, oh, let me attack Joe Biden. And he can use his airtime how he wants, Professor, but it's not consistent with what he needs to do, which is legally defend himself. And since Joan brought it up, let's take a brief look at one other moment from that interview.
I'm probably the biggest anti-communist we ever met. There's no way on the Russian age or anybody else's age, and I was a lawyer who was representing a client who was innocent. The biggest burden a lawyer can have is to represent an innocent man, and I did it damn well.
Professor?
It's not a crime to represent someone who's innocent. It's not a crime to represent someone who has committed some kind of wrongdoing. But what it is a crime to do is to represent a foreign government without first registering your representation with the United States and with the Justice Department. And that's really the crux of this. It may be a very difficult charge if that charge is brought to prove, but that's the crux of this investigation as we understand it right now. And I think at this point, any good lawyer would advise his client, who had just been the subject of an executed search warrant, to just be quiet at this point.
And Professor, how unusual is it in your view to have a lawyer under this sort of situation publicly say, oh, this isn't about me, it's about my client? It's tricky, but he still has obligations to that client and shouldn't be dragging them into this casualty.
Well, that's certainly true, and there may be a whole spate of legal and professional ethics questions about how one continues to represent a client when you yourself, as a lawyer, are in legal jeopardy. But I think we've seen over the last 4 years that what's Casas for legal representation in Trump world is very different from what other lawyers might do. We saw the same kind of playbook roll out with Michael Cohen when he was in this same situation, facing down a search warrant, also demanding some sort of recourse for his client, who he believed to be part of a deep state plot to bring down a sitting president. So again, we've seen this before. We've seen this for 4 years. It's more of the same.
Do you think that part of the reason, Professor, that it looks so odd is that Donald Trump seems to operate with arm's length, even for lawyers and other agents and employees who've been with him for many years? He seems to constantly be shifting out agents, lawyers, accountants, and he'll say publicly, hey, reliance, a legal doctrine that sometimes gets you out of things if you can say you didn't know what they were doing. He almost seems to be deliberate about it.
Well, there does seem to be a great deal of distancing. Again, we saw this with Michael Cohen. I think we're seeing it here. I think we already saw it in the post-election landscape when he refused to pay Rudy Giuliani. And now there is, of course, discussion that the Trump war chest should be deployed to aid Rudy Giuliani in these particular circumstances. I think that's highly unlikely for all of the reasons you suggest, but not the least of which is that this president or this former president seems to be at great pains to keep this particular lawyer at arm's length.
Joan, do you think these two individuals will continue to split?
Oh, I certainly hope so. But obviously, as the professor raises, there's no way that Donald Trump is paying his legal bills, because he didn't pay legal bills when he'd actually authorized folks to do work for him. So the notion that he or Alan Dershowitz think that this might be a different situation, it just shows us, I think, how deluded Rudy Giuliani and people around him are. It would be very entertaining and perhaps great for the country if these two guys go at each other, because I think they know a lot about what each of them has done.
Yeah, and who could have seen this coming? Donald Trump not paying his lawyers. Only a person with a passing familiarity with everything Donald Trump's ever done in his life. Only that kind of person. I'm supposed to fit in a break. Joan and Melissa, thanks for kicking us off tonight, you guys.
Sorry.
Appreciate it. This is our shortest break, 30 seconds. We're coming up in the program. Derek Chauvin seeking a new trial. We'll explain why. But first, next, Matt Gaetz is actually speaking out in his first big interview since that Tucker Carlson fiasco. When we're back in 30 seconds.
The COVID vaccines are here.
It's been a little confusing.
So it's more important than ever to make a plan. Roll up your sleeves.
And visit planyourvaccine.com to find out when and where to get your vaccine.
What happens to your body language when your underarms are cared for? It shows. Our new Dove Advanced Hair Formula is effective and kind to skin, leaving underarms cared for and you more confident and carefree.
He's back, but you can decide how clear he's being. Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz basically dodging some key questions about the federal sex crimes probe, which includes possible sex with a minor and sex trafficking allegations. These are basically his first extended comments since that bombshell Daily Beast report, which we also reported on, about an alleged confession letter from Gaetz' indicted ally that accused Gaetz of having and paying for sex with a minor. Here is how Gaetz responds.
Tell us your version of events and what you lived through in the last month.
Well, the things the media has said about me are lies, and the truth will prevail. There is a desire in big government, in big media, in big tech to target, deplatform, and destroy those who champion the America First cause.
Whatever you make of that broader criticism, it's very much the Trump playbook because Mr. Gaetz didn't actually give any version of the underlying events, just talk about the media. And this is also the first interview since what many viewed as a train wreck appearance on Fox News with Tucker Carlson, who himself said it was one of the weirdest interviews he's ever done. For context, we turn to New York Times legal writer Emily Bazelon. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
What did you think of that answer there and his attempt to come out and speak to a relatively friendly audience after that really bombshell set of accusations in the Beast?
I mean, I think we see Matt Gaetz here deciding not to just stay out of the limelight, not acting as strangely as he did on Tucker Carlson's show, so in that sense doing a little cleanup, but as you said, not giving any specifics, and it's easy to accuse the media of lying without saying what they're lying about. He's just clearly decided that the best defense here is to go on offense.
And in the same interview, he was asked about legal action if these things being said about him are so false or potentially defamatory. He basically pivots. Take a look.
The outrageous allegations against you, sexual impropriety, underage, and everything else, and then somebody trying to extort you and your family. Don't you have a very strong case against these people? Are you taking legal action, Matt Gaetz?
And yes, we are working to bring my extorters to justice.
Whatever the title of extortion, everyone should understand the Daily Beast reports on the alleged confession letter, which was written by Joel Greenberg. NBC News didn't verify that letter. We've always mentioned that. But they do report that Greenberg wrote that Gaetz paid for sex with multiple women, as well as a girl who was 17 at the time. So when you look at that response there, again, you can't tell if Mr. Gorka is so bought into the theory that he wants to tee it up, or he's finding a friendly-sounding way of actually calling out the fact that Gaetz may not want to have a separate case on this if it's not strong, if people are not indeed lying about it.
Right, I mean, maybe there's a hint of skepticism on Gorka's part, because if you're going to make this big conspiracy charge about people in the Department of Justice and this tens of millions of dollars of extortion ring against your family, you would think you might have some evidence to back that up. If Gaetz doesn't have any evidence and doesn't move forward with some way of proving it, then it just looks like a giant distraction. I suppose we don't know the answer yet, just as we also don't know whether the allegations against Matt Gaetz are going to prove out. This is a story in which there's lots of throwing around of huge accusations, and it's very unresolved.
fair points. Emily, I'll take a point of personal beat privilege to say one of the reasons we really think you're a great guest is we can always get more than one piece of analysis out of you. Is the way the stories have been these days, obviously many legal developments. And so there is some news here on basically the postscript of the Chauvin trial. I want to get Emily's view on it. To update everyone, this is late breaking today. That former officer Chauvin filed a motion for a new trial. Now, motions for new trials are fairly common. He is alleging that it's not a fair trial. He was, of course, found guilty of murder in the death of George Floyd. The news comes as reports also reveal that one Chauvin juror appeared to participate in an MLK commemorative march in Washington where members of Floyd's family addressed the crowd. Walk us through what this means, Emily, and how typical it is for defense lawyers to try to find ways to quibble with or make procedural challenges to a verdict.
I mean, it's completely common, really required to file a motion for a new trial, as the defense did here, and they're making a pretty standard list of reasons. They're talking about how the judge didn't order a change of venue, he didn't sequester the jury, various rulings they didn't like during the trial. It all looked like pretty standard fare. I think what's interesting is this accusation about the juror, right? The juror, as I understand it, answered in the questionnaire that he had not attended any protests that were motivated by the death of George Floyd. And yet he was at this particular event that you mentioned. And so I think that one question is whether he didn't understand that event to be a protest commemorating George Floyd. What exactly was in his mind as he was attending? And, you know, it's possible that the judge will call him in and try to ask some questions to make sure that he wasn't dissembling in some way. And I think that is the issue, whether he was being honest from his point of view about his perspective and what he had done leading up to the trial.
Right, and as you say, in contrast to the rather standard procedural rulings like everyone saw the defense wanted a different location, they didn't get it, that's not usually going to overturn a jury verdict. If there is some scintilla or slice here where you can get into was a juror deliberately dishonest up front, how did the voir dire work, that kind of thing. But as you reminded us, pretty standard indeed, a criminal defense lawyer is supposed to exhaust all such potential remedies. Emily, on more than one topic, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks very much for having me.
Appreciate it. Coming up, another hot mic bomb. They live, but do they learn? It can happen to anyone. Often happens to politicians. Leader McCarthy caught trashing his own colleague, Liz Cheney. We have the audio. And later, a leaked internal GOP memo. Why does it explain and rebut the very woke criticism we've been hearing from some in the party? We will get the answers because it is Shea Day. Stay with us.
The Dove Beauty Bar makes my skin feel fresh. I've encouraged Serena, my best friend, to switch. Those moisturize and clean my friend Stephanie. Her skin is dry. I'm like, girl, you get you some Dove. She hooked me up with the Portal Moisturizing Cream. Dove cleans effectively and cares beautifully.
Save money with Allstate. You feel like you're winning. Safe drivers save 40%. Saving is easy when you're in good hands. Allstate. Click or call for a quote today.
Sure about this.
Experience capability. Crafted by Lexus. The remarkable GX and LX.
Get 0.9% APR financing on the 2021 GX 460.
Experience amazing at your Lexus dealer.
My husband and I have never eaten healthier.
Shingles doesn't care. I logged 10,000 steps today. Shingles doesn't care.
I get as much fresh air as possible.
Good for you, but Shingles doesn't care. Because 1 in 3 people will get shingles. You need protection. But no matter how healthy you feel, your immune system declines as you age, increasing your risk for getting shingles. So what cannot protect you? Shingrix protects. For the first time ever, you can protect yourself from shingles with a vaccine proven to be over 90% effective. Shingrix is a vaccine used to prevent shingles in adults 50 years and older. Shingrix does not protect everyone and is not for those with severe allergic reactions to its ingredients or to a previous dose. The most common side effects are pain, redness, and swelling at the injection site, muscle pain, tiredness, headache, shivering, fever, and upset stomach. Talk to your pharmacist or doctor about protecting yourself with Shingrix. Shingles doesn't care, but you should.
Dad, it's a video call. Hold the phone in front of you. Get mom.
Power E-Trade gives you an award-winning app with 24/7 support when you need it the most. Don't get mad, get E-Trade and start trading today.
Leave any more paper towels?
Yep, check the pantry. I just ordered from Box.
What's Box?
Box is the only wholesale club that lets you tap into the value of buying in bulk online.
Is that right?
Unlike other wholesale clubs and online stores, Box has no membership fees. Delivery is super fast and free on orders over $49. Oh, and look, free samples. Now you don't have to worry about running out.
Can I order cookies next time?
Save an extra 15% on your first order at Box.com. The better way to shop bulk.
How does Daily Harvest work? We make delicious food built on organic fruits and vegetables. We start with ingredients from farmers we actually know. Then we get to work, making food that's nourishing and ready in minutes. We take care of food so food can take care of you. Get started today at dailyharvest.com.
This is Pretty Litter, the world's smartest cat litter. Its ultralight, super absorbent formula traps odors, and its crystals change colors to help you monitor your cat's health. Plus, Pretty Litter offers free delivery. Order today at prettylitter.com.
New Republican strategy documents show how the party is trying to rebrand as populist and against some corporations, which leads to this now recurring talk of woke companies, which is drawing some mockery.
Let's just cut to the chase. The big tech platforms are owned and operated by woke capitalists. They're leftists. They're liberals.
There's no way Mark Zuckerberg is woke. At most, he's switched on.
And there are other reasons this supposed clash with some corporations does not add up, other than that. As we've reported right here in The Beat, this talk didn't just come out of nowhere. It echoes a very deliberate PR attempt outlined in GOP documents to find ways for Republicans to say they're confronting corporations and representing working class voters. From the attacks on woke companies and big tech to picking a fight with China that emphasizes support for working Americans. Now keep in mind, these are basically telegraphed, strategic Republican moves. It's designed to create the idea that they're clashing with these companies when the Republican Party's support for Wall Street is not really changing on big-ticket money items like taxes, labor, regulation. Instead, they are focused on fairly vague ways to kind of play out this fight with corporations. From wokeness, what does that even mean, to China, how do you even address it? It's all become something of a MAGA buzzword salad.
I think corporate America, by trying to genuflect to wokeness, I think they've gone down a really bad road. What about the fact that you're doing business with the Communist Party of China?
There's something about the woke politics inside these companies, the way they think of themselves is not really American companies, and it's somehow very, very difficult for them to have a sharp anti-China edge of any sort.
The last speaker was Trump supporter and tech billionaire Peter Thiel, an early Facebook backer, also a reminder that not all of Silicon Valley is somehow automatically anti-Trump. As for the GOP memo, it makes the political point that many Americans have a negative view of big tech, so Republicans should focus on what they call egregious suppression of conservative speech. Now, as a matter of policy, if you think about this just big picture, this could be bipartisan. There are liberals who have plenty of concern about Silicon Valley's outsized influence and its impact on speech. But this Republican critique is actually pretty self-interested. It's not about changing the laws or helping the workers at this or other companies. It's really all about whether Republicans get to talk the way they want on all platforms, as the memo puts it, whether there's a concern about suppression of conservative voices.
If we do not push back against Google and Twitter, we will lose our democratic ability to talk to each other. Big tech should be ashamed of how they're so clearly
trying to aid the Joe Biden campaign. Big tech is trying to silence any voice of dissent.
Let's take an example. Let's say that we think that Facebook is politically biased compared to the left, which it seems pretty clear at this point they are.
Alert from Mail. Online status.
24 hours, he's got 2 of the top performing links on Facebook of his political views. He's up there, right behind Fox News, and right ahead of another right-winger, Dan Bongino, suggesting they are doing pretty well on Facebook even while they play victim. But this is broader than just that micro view. The debates over why Trump's messages, including a call for insurrection, and whether that got him suspended from maybe more than one media platform for good, Twitter forever, Facebook for some time. In fact, they're going to decide tomorrow whether to reinstate Trump's account. But the bigger picture is researchers who looked into the matter actually don't find evidence that there is a top-down anti-conservative crusade here. Indeed, the bigger concern is disinformation. And that brings us to the heart of the question. You look at all this taken together, and you have a party that desperately needs to deal with a pandemic recession and a new president who's giving out stimulus checks and building roads and bridges and finding Republican support. How do you rebrand as working class with made-up, fairly professorial arguments about woke companies and things with China that you can't really explain as policy when your big solution is you should be allowed to talk more on Facebook? I want to bring in a very special guest to get into the answers to these questions, and that is our deep dive political conversation, which is always a special day here on The Beat. We call it Che Day, with political strategist Che Kumazuri. He worked on 3 presidential campaigns, and this is actually part 2 of a series he's contributed to as we try to understand why we're hearing so much about big tech and woke companies from Republicans. Thanks for coming back, sir.
Thank you, Rory. How are you?
I'm great. What I love about some of the points that you've been exploring here, and I mentioned this as part 2, is that it's very easy to immediately get bogged down, whether you're at a dinner party or spending too much time on Twitter, in responding to the one little thing in front of you. Even fact-checking, well, wait, they are popular on Facebook, as we mentioned. But you're arguing there's something much broader going on. What is it?
Yeah, I think first of all, we need to sort of differentiate GOP opposition to, say, trade with China and Democratic opposition to trade with China. When a person like Sherrod Brown, who is very much protectionist, opposes trade with China, he does so as part of a larger program to keep workers' wages up. You know, it includes for unionization efforts, it includes support for universal daycare, etc. The whole goal is to help workers keep more of their paycheck and have more security in their jobs. That is not what the GOP does when they oppose trade with China. They oppose foreign trade simply because they oppose foreigners. And the same thing kind of is true with big tech. The whole reason they fight against big tech is because of the deplatforming of Donald Trump. It is because they know that they very much need full access to these platforms to spread lies and disinformation. That is very different from the liberal argument against big tech, which is to try to stop the spreading of lies and misinformation on the internet. It is crucial for the conservative movement that they have access to these platforms. It is a movement that is heavily reliant on scapegoating and conspiracy theories and pushing emotional hot buttons, and nothing does that better than social media and internet. Look at the rise of Trump.
Yeah, I mean, you just laid that out. It's perfect. Makes sense. Because you mentioned the deplatforming, as they put it, or what many of these companies call enforcing safety rules, although I've argued on this program it is tricky, and I don't know about an unreviewable corporate power to do that, although the insurrection would be one of the violent ends where you want to avoid that. But we do have a headline for you, Che. Breaking late today, Donald Trump, after talking about creating a social media platform, instead of doing that or starting an app or a tech company or any such matter, instead he's launched a blog. It's a section of his website that operates like a WordPress blog. And so, Che, I'm not here to make Donald Trump look ridiculous. Today he's done that all by himself. They didn't need to pretend or lie that they were going to create an app or a tech platform. If they put millions into it, that would have been an interesting thing. What does it tell you that he is going straight Blogspot, straight Live Journal, straight back to 95, baby?
Well, the reality is he couldn't put it together. He didn't have the access to the kind of engineers and venture capital, quite frankly. Perhaps his friend Peter Thiel refused to help him out. In that regard, he could easily have helped him out in terms of putting that together. But he couldn't put it together. It really, what this shows you is how much Donald Trump needed the platform of Twitter, how much the conservative movement needs access to Facebook to really push their message. Without Twitter, as Franklin Porter, the writer for The Atlantic, said, Donald Trump started out as Cecil the Lion and he ended up as President of the United States. That was entirely the result of Twitter. It is something that he learned, quite frankly, when he did the birther conspiracy. And he was able to use Twitter to move that conspiracy theory and get the media to cover it. Now, nobody covers almost anything he has to say. And that will basically be true of this blog they're putting out. It's just going to be another blog on the internet, uncovered by everybody except for a few people on the right wing. It's really very sad and pathetic, but that's kind of where Trump has ended up. He just ended up as just another blogger on the internet, not the most powerful man in what was once the most powerful part of the United States.
Yeah, I mean, you lay it out. It's striking. I know you flagged something that Pat Buchanan used to talk about. Let's take a look at that.